Welcome back inside Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this masterclass, you will know how to integrate your footage with 3D scenarios using Nuke and Unreal Engine. Once our render in Unreal are complete, we can come back inside of Nuke and start to create our first composite. As you can see, I add two read nodes, one with the environment and another one with the fog. I always recommend you to check your input transform. As you see, my read node are set in ACCG input transform. You can set your input transform in the control panel of your read node. Now we have to combine the result of our chroma key process with our environment. In this case, I have to consider the difference about the resolution of my environment made in Unreal and my EXR sequence exported in DaVinci. I remember to all of you that we exported a sequence in 4K resolution and we made a Full HD render inside Unreal. Obviously, you can create from Unreal a 4K resolution sequence, but in this case I prefer to export in Full HD in order to save time during the render process. So how can I match the resolution of my EXR sequence with my environment? It's really simple. We just need to create a new node called Reformat. The Reformat node will receive an input with the resolution data and will convert in a new resolution setting the output format. Now let's connect our Reformat node to our Merge node. And let's change the output format from root format to HD 1080. Okay. Now let's reorganize our reformat node. Okay, I prefer keep my reformat node close to the new read node that I created. Now I will add a new merge node to combine the reformat node and the read for node. Let's connect the A input to the reformat node and the B input to our environment. Now I will reorganize my structure. Now let's visualize the result of our merge node. Perfect. As you can see, we create a really good result just merging the two nodes. Now let's add the fog. We have to create a new merge node, connect the A input to the read node of the fog and the B input to our merge node. As you can see, this is not the result that we want to achieve. To improve our fog inside our render, we have to add some node before the merge node 7. The first thing that I want to do is to reduce this ugly effect of the edges of my fog. So let's add a blur node after our read node. Let's increase our blur. As you can see, the result is a little bit better, but it's not enough, something missing. We have to give to the blur node the information about the position of our subject inside of the environment. It's really simple. We have to connect the mask input of our blur node to our reformat node. As you can see, I can drag the little triangle in the blur node box and I will connect to the reformat node. Let's reorganize our line. Okay, and now I just need to add a grid node before my blur node. I connect the mask input of my grid node to my reformat node. And adjusting the gain value of my grid node, I can adjust the exposure of the fog in the area of my subject. In order to understand what is happening to our fog, we can just pre-visualize our blur node. As you can see, changing the gain, I change the exposure of the area of my subject. Now let's return to see our composite complete. I love the presence of the fog inside my renders, but in this case, I think it's better reduce the amount of fog inside of this composite. To do that, I can simply add a new grade node before the grade node that we created before. And setting the gain, we can set the global gain of our fog. If you can see, if I reduce the gain, I reduce also the amount of fog inside my render. For me, this is a really more realistic look. And if I zoom inside my viewport, I can see the fog over my subject, but without any hard edges. Now our base composite is complete, but we can do another adjustment in order to match in a better way our subject with our environment. So let's add a grid node after the read node of my environment. Now let's visualize our merge node 6, which is the combination between the reformat node and the read node of my environment. And in the upper zone of my viewport, I increase the exposure of my viewport. With this trick, we can overexpose our image and check if the exposure of our subject is the same of our environment. In this case, I think that my environment is a little bit too much exposed than my subject. To match the exposure of the environment and the reformat node, I will adjust some value of my grid node. But before, we have to deactivate it. Now let's go on the property panel of our grade node 4 in this case. And now I have to find the darkest pixel of my render. In this case, it's really simple. I can use this black window. And with the black point, I will pick the darkest pixel. Remember to press Ctrl when you click your pixel to pick the color. Now I have to analyze my subject and find the darkest pixel of it. In this case, I will pick it using not the black point, but the lift of my grade node. Doing this, I will match the black point to the value of the lift. Now, let's zoom out on our viewport, restore our exposure, and let's activate our grade node 4. As you can see, we adjust the black point of my image. In this case, I think that the adjustment is too much strong, so I will decrease a little bit the effect of the grade node, adjusting the mix of the property panel of the grade node 4. And as you can see, we achieve a really realistic result with few steps. Now let's move inside this sequence. And if I look to my subject, I can notice that she is a little too much exposed than my environment. So let's adjust the exposure of our subject. To do that, I can add a grade node between the merge node and the reformat node. Let's decrease a little bit the gain, something like 0.74. Okay. And now we match in a really simple way the exposure of our subject and our environment. Maybe 0.8 is a little bit better. Yes, okay. Okay, now I'm pretty happy of this result. Now let's return to see our composition with also the fog inside of it. And maybe I can add a little bit the fog. Okay. And setting the multiply, I can change also the color of the fog. As you can see, setting the RGB channels, I can change the color of my fog. In this case, I will decrease a little bit the green of my fog. And now we complete our composite base of our footage. In the next lesson, I will add more realism of our composite, adding the depth of field and the shadow of our subject. Welcome back inside Unreal Engine for Filmmakers. In this masterclass, you will know how to integrate your footage with 3D scenarios using Nuke and Unreal Engine. Once we complete our base composite, we have to add some missing elements that will allow you to get a realistic look. Let's start with the shadows. I will visualize my environment node, and I will create a new node called Keyer. Let's connect our Keyer node to our read node. And activating the visualization of our Keyer node, let's press A on our viewport. Using the Alpha Viewer with the Keyer node, we can see our image in scale of gray. Adjusting the properties of my Keyer node, I want to eliminate any type of feather between the white and black. So let's move the A point and the B point in the range of the Keyer. And as you can see, in the area of my bridge, I eliminate any kind of feather between black and white. Now I will add a grade node, and I will put before the grade node 4, and another node called key mix. I will connect the A input of my key mix to my grade node, and the B input of my key mix to my read node. I will adjust a little bit the node structure. Okay, in this way. And finally, let's connect the mask input of our keymix node to our keyer node. In this way, all the edit that we are doing between the read node and the keymix node will affect only the white area of the keyer node. So let's visualize our keymix node and return to RGB visualization. And we can try to adjust the gain of our grid node. And as you can see, we are affecting only the white area of our key node. I'm doing this process because I want to create an entire environment made only by shadows, without any type of lights. And we will combine these new shadows that we created with the shadows of the real footage of our EXR sequence. Remember that we want to create shadows. We don't want to create black area inside our environment. So try to be gentle with the gain value and don't push too hard. Maybe something like that, it could be a good pointing start. But before to think about the exposure of our shadows inside our environment, we have to extract the shadows of our real footage. To do that, I have to create a new keyer node, and I will connect to my read node. In case you have a noisy image, I recommend that you put a denoise node before the keyer node. In this case, I will not use the alpha channel of my sequence, but I will choose a channel between the red, green, and blue channel. I have to choose the color channel with the higher contrast between lights and shadows. In this case, I will choose for the green channel because I have a good contrast between darks and lights, and instead the red and blue channel, the green channel is the less noisy channel. In the properties of our keyer node, we have to set the operation to green keyer. In this way, we will work inside the green channel. Now let's activate the alpha viewer inside our viewer. And now let's move the A and the B point of our range. In this case, I have soft shadows, so I want to create a smooth fall off between the white area and the black area of my alpha viewer. As you can see, moving the A point of our range, we will adjust the darkest areas of our footage. Okay, something like that I think is pretty good. Maybe we can make our shadow a little bit more soft. Okay, something like this. Okay. I'm just trying to find a good point. Okay. I also recommend you to don't push so hard your shadows. As you can see, in this way we'll obtain a really noisy shadow, and we don't want that. I prefer achieve a great selection of my shadows and have the black point only in the contact between the shoes and the ground. Could be a really good starting point for our shadow. Once we complete our selection, we have to invert the operation. Doing this, we are preserving the darkest area of our image and not the brightest. As we are doing a selection inside a 4K resolution sequence, we have to add a new reformat node. Let's choose our output in Full HD. And now we have to combine the result of the selection of my green keyer and my luma keyer. So let's add a new merge node and set the operation to multiply. Now we have to connect the A input to our reformat node and the B input to our keyer node. And finally, we have to connect the mask input of our key mix to our merge node. I will organize my structure, and now let's visualize the key mix result. As you can see now, our luma keyer is limited inside the selection of our green keyer. Now, let's include in our viewer also the subject. And let's check our timeline. I have to admit that the result is pretty good. If I want to modify my result, I suggest you to modify the range, the green keyer, and the luma keyer. For example, now if I move the A value of my green keyer, as you can see, the result is really, really different. Now let's make a really, really little adjustment just to push a little bit more the shadows. Now we have to create a mask to exclude all the black area of my green keyer that I don't want to put inside my composite. Let's create a new roto node, and we have to create a mask around our shadow. Now, as we made for the chroma key process, we have to track our mask for the entire duration of our composite. Once we complete to track our mask, we have to connect the roto node to the merge node. And as you can see, we eliminate all the unwanted details inside of our composite. I also suggested to add a blur node to make our mask more soft. You can just press B on your keyboard, and let's increase the size of your blur node in order to make your mask smooth. Now I will adjust the grid node and the other node in order to achieve a better result for my shadows. I also suggested to make always comparison between the real shadows and the CG shadows that we are creating inside of Nuke. In this case, I think that my CG shadows are too strong than the originals. So let's adjust our green keyer node. Okay, I think that this is a good result. I also remember to consider that the grid node is a 4K node and the composition is a full HD node. So it's normal to see a difference about the quality of the resolution. But if you see the viewport entirely, it's almost impossible to see difference between the grid node and the merge node. So you don't have to worry about it. Let's adjust a little bit our shadows. Now I can see the edge of my rotor node, so I have to adjust my blur node in order to eliminate these really ugly edges. So let's increase our shadow. Okay, perfect. I also recommend you sometimes to check the final node of our structure. I think that this is a really, really good result. For my opinion, I think that the grid node that I created in the last lesson is not working so well. So I think I will increase the mix of the properties a little bit more. In this case, I will set a really low value for the mix. It's almost invisible, the work of the grid node now, but I think that is better than before. Before to close the chapter about the shadow, I want to give you an advice for your future composite. As you can see, there are some markers in the ground of our studio. Sometimes those markers can create some artifacts for our shadows. To fix these type of issues, I suggest you to add a blur node after your keyer node. In this way, we will make our shadow more soft, but we will also prevent some problems caused by the tracker markers. In this case, markers are not creating problem inside the shadow of my composition, so I can delete the blur node. Now we can finally add the depth of field inside of our composition. We have to create a new node after the key mix node. This node is called Z defocus. As you can see, just adding the defocus node, our environment will be out of focus. But in order to create a real depth of field, we have to adjust our properties in a correct way. So in the properties panel of our ZDFocus node, let's change the depth channel from depth Z to final image movie render queue word depth.red. This channel contains all the information about the depth of the environment. Now let's change the math from far 0 to depth. And now moving our focal point inside of our viewport, we can set the point of focus of our camera. As you can see now, the area of my subject is the only area in focus. Now we have to animate our focal point for the entire duration of our sequence. So inside the properties panel of our ZD Focus node, let's find focal plane and add a new key pressing on Set Key. Now I create my first keyframe for my focal point. Now let's start from the frame 0, and each time we will move the focal point, we will create a new keyframe. In this case, I will update the position of my focal point each 40 or 30 frame. In the meantime, I want to give you advice. If in your footage you can see the ground, I suggest you to not use the focal point, but adjust manually the focal plane value and find the best realistic solution. Okay, we finish our process, and as you can see, the result is not so realistic because we shot this clip with a wide lens. In this case, is a 14mm lens, and with ultra wide lenses, you will not achieve this type of depth of field. Maybe in this case, you don't need to activate the ZD focus node, but let's increase the size and the maximum values of our properties. In this case, I will set something around 2.5, and I will set the maximum to 6. As you can see now, if we zoom in a little bit, we can see a little change inside of our CG render. In this case, it's okay. We don't need to create a strong depth of field. Maybe we can increase the value of the size to 3. The ZD focus node is a really powerful tool, but also is really energy consuming. So it's possible that now your timeline will be really more slow than before. I suggest you to deactivate the ZD focus node just to see your timeline in a fast way and reactivate before the render. Now we can finally render our composite. To do that, we can use a specific node called write node. So let's press on tab and search for write. Let's connect our write node to the last node of our structure. And if you're using the Nuke non-commercial version, I suggest you to add a reformat node before the write node and force the full HD resolution. You don't need always to add the reformat node, but sometimes Nuke needs a reminder to set the right resolution for the output. Now we can set our write node. Let's start with set the output of our composition. Press on the folder icon and choose the directory which we want to export your composition. Write the name of your composite, in this case UFF underscore tutorial 2, that because I created another tutorial export composition, and add another underscore and 4 hashes .exr. You must specify the file extension also when you are naming your composition. Let's press save. And now our write node is set to the EXR render. If you are asking why I put 4 hashes inside the name of my sequence, it's that because they will be placeholders for the counter of our export. If you don't put the hashes inside your file name, you can export EXR sequences. Let's activate write ACES compliant EXR and be sure that your output transform is set to the correct space transform, in this case ACES CG. Now press on render icon, and from this panel you can set the frame range of your export, and I recommend you to keep all these options deactivated because you don't need to render proxy and you don't need to use the frame server, continue your render even if there are some problems. Let's press OK, and now our render start. Once our render will be complete, we can edit our composition and do the color grade inside of DaVinci Resolve. Welcome back inside Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this masterclass, you will know how to integrate your footage with 3D scenarios using Nuke and Unreal Engine. In this video, I will show you how to add some new effects inside your composite to achieve a result from this to this. First, let's talk about the depth of field. In this shot, as you can see, I create a really simple depth of field with a look from a spherical lens. But we can simulate the look from an anamorphic lens. To do that, we have two options. The first is to edit the aspect ratio of the filter of your lens. In this case, you have to leave the default value for the filter type as disk and change the aspect ratio. As you can see, changing the value of the aspect ratio, I will modify the look of my depth of field. And increasing this value, I will achieve an anamorphic look. We can also achieve a more realistic look using an image that replicates the look of an anamorphic bokeh. I will duplicate the read node of this image. You can download it below this video. As you can see, this is a simple image of an anamorphic lens. I adjust a little bit the gain using this grid node. Nothing special. And now let's connect the filter input of the ZD Focus node to our grade node. And changing the filter type on the ZD Focus properties from disk to image, we can achieve this anamorphic look based on the image. Be sure to match the same settings that you can see in my property panel. In this case, the image that I'm using is not a great image. I found only this image on the internet, but as you can see, we achieve a really good result, and for me is a really better than changing the aspect ratio of the disk. Now let's check our composite. As you can see, the look is really realistic. Now we can add another element inside of our composite, a lens flare. First, add a new read node and import your lens flare video. In this case, I choose a lens flare from Plasma. You can download this specific lens flare in the link below of this video. Now let's analyze our read node. And as you can see, the format is 4K DCP. As you know, we are working inside a full HD resolution workflow. So we have to add a new reformat node and change the output format to HD. Now we have to create a freeze frame of our lens flare video. In this case, I choose this frame and I add a new node called frame hold. Now all the edit that we do after this node will be applied to a freeze frame video. However, if we work before the frame hold node, we can work on the entire video of our lens flare. Now let's create a new merge node. Let's connect the B input to our merge node and the A input to our frame hold. In this case, this lens flare video has no transparency, so the over operation is not the correct operation to set in our merge node. So let's change our operation from over to plus. As you can see now, the darkest pixel of our read node become transparent. Now I have to change the position of my lens flare in order to make it more realistic. We can simply modify the scale and the position of our lens flare, creating a new transform node. In this case, I have created the transform node before the frame mode, but there's no difference. As you can see now, we can move this gizmo and change the position of our flare. Now I will position here. I will scale a little bit. Okay. I remember you that this is a 4K DCP video, so we are not losing details scaling the video inside our Full HD viewport. In this case, I'm positioning the lens flare in this side because inside the Unreal Engine, I add an emitter exactly here. Maybe here it could be a good position for our lens flare. Okay. Because I rotate the frame of my lens flare, now I can see a edge of my frame. In order to, before the transform node called crop. See, looking the property panel of the crop node, we can change the softness of our frame. I will increase my crop node at a high value, like 100. And as you can see, we make the edges of our frame really, really smooth. Maybe I can change a little bit the position. Something around here. I can scale a little bit my image, and also I will do some adjustment in order to find the better spot for my lens flare position. Once we find the right spot for our lens flare position, we have to animate this frame matching the camera movement. Maybe I can adjust manually frame by frame the position of my lens flare, but I'm sure that I will never achieve the perfect match between the lens flare and my composition. But I can use the information from the camera track in order to get the animation data for my lens flare. This is the camera track of my footage. Let's see the camera. Let's open also the camera track. Let's move inside the 3D viewport. And as you can see, we have our 3D camera that match the movement of our composition. Now I will add a new node inside my composition that will get the information about its position and the camera movement. So let's find for Axis 3D Classic and add to our composition. We can see our node inside the 3D viewport, and as you can see, I can move the axis inside my 3D viewport. Now I will add a new viewport in order to visualize better what I want to do. In the first viewport, I set the 3D camera. Now in my viewer 1, I can see a POV of my camera. And in the second viewer, I can see the entire 3D scene. In order to see my axis node inside the viewport, I double click to my axis node. And as you can see, now we can move the position of the axis node. In this case, I will set the position of my axis node close to my camera in order to match the position of the real light of my 3D environment. But we can also replicate the position of the sun, for example. In that case, we have to set the position of the axis node really, really, really far from the camera. Now I will return to my old position and I will set the final position of my axis here. Okay. Now I have to add a new node that obtain the information about the axis position for the entire duration of my timeline. This node is called reconcile 3D node. I connect the axis input to my axis 2, the camera input to my camera, and the image input to my read node. Now on the property panel of the reconcile 3D node, I click on create keyframe. I set the frame range, and now my reconcile will track the information about my axis node. Now we can close the viewer 2. Okay. And in the properties of our reconcile node, let's copy the animation of our XY output. Now let's return to our composite structure. I will clean the viewport, closing the nodes. And now we can add a new transform node after the frame hold node. This transform node will receive the information about the animation of our axis node. So in the translate, press on this icon and let's press on paste absolute. And if we zoom out, we can see the animation keyframes of our lens flare. But now we have to restore the original position of our lens flare. So we have to copy our transform node and paste it between the transform node and the frame mold. Now let's open the property panel of our new transform node and set the translate to no animations. Let's click on invert. And now we restore the original position of our animated lens flare. We can also add a grid node in order to change the look of our lens flare. In this case, I will add my grid node after the transform node. And adjusting the multiply, we can set a different color for our lens flare. I suggest you to don't try to replicate too much the same color of our environment, because normally the lens flares add new colors inside of our image. Obviously, it's okay, try to match the composition main color in our lens flare, but we don't have to create a perfect match, for my opinion. No, I think this is okay. And now on the mix of our merge node, we can decide to decrease the visibility of our lens flare. Now we can add another effect called camera dust, like a dirty mask for our camera. You can download the camera dust video in the link below of this video. In this case, I will copy it from here. As I made for the lens flare, I will add a new merge node and I will set the operation to plus. And also in this case, I have to choose the best frame of my plasma dust video and use the frame mode node to freeze it. Okay, maybe this could be a good frame. Let's add our frame hold. Okay. And now let's see our result. In this case, this dust read node add also grain inside my composition. So I will add the noise node in order to achieve a better result. Let's analyze our dust. And obviously it's okay add grain in our composite, but I prefer did this operation inside DaVinci Resolve. Now, don't forget to match the resolution of your read node with your composite. Now we have to add a realistic behavior to our dust based on the illumination of our composite. And also we will affect our dust by the flare position. Now we have to add some node between the two merge node. The first node is a blur node. So let's blur our image. Okay, maybe 30 is too much. I will set a lower value. Let's try with 5. Now let's add a new grid node and set the gain color to the main color of my composite, in this case orange. Now I will add a new merge node with a plus operation, and I will connect my merge node to my flare node structure. So let's add a new point. I add also a new blur before my merge node, and I will set around 22. And now I will switch the input of my merge node using the shortcut Shift X. Okay. Now I will add a new merge node, connecting the V input to my merge node plus, and I will change the operation of my new merge node to multiply. Let's connect the A input to our frame hold, and I will connect my merge node multiply to my final merge node plus. Okay. Now it's like I made a Luma selection of the brightest areas of my image. Now let's see a fast before and after. As you can see, in this case, the difference is unperceivable, but usually I don't like to use aggressive dust image because, for my opinion, sometimes they create a CG fake look that I don't want to get inside my composite. Now we can make some final adjustment to our dust, adding some node between the merge node multiply and the merge node plus. So let's fix the position of our multiply node. And now we'll add a new node called convolve. With this node, we will add the anamorphic look also to our dust. So let's copy the node of our anamorphic bokeh. And I will connect the filter input of my convolve node to my read node. Now, if I check the result of my convolve node, I will see a completely black viewport. To fix this, we have to activate the use input channel in the convolve node properties. And also we have to deactivate the normalize. As you can see now, our image is completely overexposed. So let's add a new grid node to set the right exposure. So now let's check our final composite. And now also the dust has an anamorphic look. If we want, we can adjust the amount of the anamorphic look for our dust image, simply adding a transform node between the read node and the convolve node. And changing the settings of the properties of our transform node, we will also change the look of our dust. We can also check the adjustment of our transform node looking to our final node of our node structure. And in case I wanted to make our look more soft, we can add a blur node before the merge node plus. Great. With some additional effect, as you can see, we achieve a really good result. But we don't have always add these kind of effects inside of our composite, because sometimes we will achieve a worse result than the base composite. For example, think about the bridge composite we made in the last videos. In that specific case, adding a lens flare to our composite is not a good idea, because there is no reason because a lens flare could appear inside of our composite. So as I said in another video, think always before to do an adjustment inside of your composite. Think about what is really realistic and what is unrealistic. Think before to work inside of Nuke or inside Unreal. It's crucial to save time during our post-production process, because depending what we want to achieve and the power of your computer, sometimes you will need to wait also 1 hour to the ending of your composite. And made something wrong because you don't think well before can be really frustrating. In the next videos, we will see another process to integrate our subject in our CG environment, and also we will analyze some case studies from another shot we made for this masterclass. Welcome back inside Unreal Engine for filmmakers. In this masterclass, you will know how to integrate your footage with 3D scenarios using Nuke and Unreal Engine. In this new module of Unreal Engine for Filmmaker, we will explore an alternative method to integrate our footage inside of our CG renders. In this process, we will not use Nuke, but only DaVinci, After Effects, and Unreal Engine. Using this method, we can integrate our footage directly inside Unreal Engine. And also, we will not replicate the camera movement of our footage, but we will create a new camera movement using the 3D camera of Unreal. For this method, our footage must be shot on a tripod and our subject can move inside our video. First, we have to convert our log footage in Rec 709. I made this pass inside DaVinci, but you can quickly download this file in the link below this video. If you want to choose another footage, I suggest you to convert your image in Apple ProRes 444. Once we imported our footage inside After Effects, we have to create a new composition. So let's go in Composition, New Composition, and be sure that the resolution and the frame rate of your composition match with the frame rate and resolution of your media file. Now let's rename our composition, and I will call it chroma key underscore workflow. And now let's import our media file inside our composition. Now we will do the chroma key process in our footage. Even we are not using Nuke, the process is almost the same. Obviously, in this case, we will use other tools, but the steps of our chroma key process are almost the same. First, let's create our garbage matte. Let's use the rectangle tool and create a rectangle around of our subject. In this case, we don't have to track it because our subject, it will be stand in this position. Now we have to add some effect from the effect and preset panel. The first effect is the key light tool. Let's search for key light. Okay. And now, as we did with Nuke, we have to pick the color of our green. So let's use the picker and let's click here. Now I suggest you to switch your viewport to the alpha view. You can change the viewport clicking on this icon here and choose alpha. Obviously, we can improve our selection, and in order to do that, we can adjust the screen balance and the clip black and the clip white. Adjusting the screen balance, we can manage the contrast between the white and black area. In this case, I will change a little bit. Okay. And now with the clip black and the clip white, we will increase the contrast in the black areas and we will amount the exposure of the white areas. So now let's tweak a little bit. Okay. And we can consider this result our core matte. But if we turn back to our RGB view, we can see that our key light made also a dispill operation. We don't want that. So in order to achieve an intermediate result, we can set the view of our key light to intermediate result. And now some adjustment of our key light will be deactivated. Now we have to make our alpha more soft in order to achieve a soft matte. So in the effect and preset, search for key cleaner. Let's add the key cleaner. Okay. As you can see, just using the default values, our subject is really more smooth around the edges. And obviously we can check the smoothness of our alpha, checking the alpha view. We can also adjust this soft matte, changing the value of the additional edge radius. See, increasing the value of the additional edge radius, we will make our alpha more soft. In this case, I will suggest you to choose a low value around 5. And as you can see, we achieve a really good smooth edges. Now we complete the alpha selection of our subject. Now we have to dispill our image. So inside the effect panel, let's search for advanced spill suppressor. And without changing any values, we achieve a perfect dispill for our footage. But if we zoom in on the area of the shoes, we can see the shadows. I tried to remove those shadows, adjusting the key light, but we can do a workaround in order to make our process more easy. Since our subject will be stand in this position for the entire duration of the video, I can create a simple mask to remove the shadows. And in order to create a new mask inside of our footage, we can simply use the pen tool of After Effects. And now let's create our mask. Now let's change the operation of our mask from add to subtract, and opening the mask tab, we can change the expansion mask. In this case, something around -2 can be a good solution. Perfect. Now pressing on this icon, we can activate the checkboard in our viewport in order to see better the quality of our alpha selection. And I think that this is a really good result. However, we can adjust a little bit our key light, setting the screen shrink grow. Obviously increasing our value, we will grow our selection, and increasing this value, we will shrink the mask. In this case, I will reduce something around minus 0.5. Okay. And I think that is a little bit better. And as usual, I suggest you to check also the alpha viewer. Now we have to get inside our composition also the shadows of our subject. So let's duplicate our video inside of our composition. And we have to delete all the effect that we made. In this case, I will also delete the second mask that I created before. But before to start to extract our shadows, I will create a new precomposition of my chroma key footage. So let's press on precompose, and I will call it chroma key underscore footage. Be sure that you move all the attributes inside the new composition and press OK. Now I will hide my precomposition. And now let's extract our shadows. First, I want to remove the colors from my image and achieve a gray scale. So let's add a new effect called tint. Perfect. The next step is something similar that we made with the keyer node. To do this inside of After Effects, we can use the effect levels. And now, adjusting the range of my levels, I will isolate the shadows area. As you can see, this is almost the same process that we made in Nuke with the green keyer node. So let's find the better range for our levels. In this case, I want to create a smooth fall off of my shadows. Now, we will use this information about this selection to set our alpha channel. And we will use the shift channels effect. Now we have to set the take alpha from alpha to luminance. And now we will set all the other channels to full off. And as you can see, now we have our alpha image, but we have to invert the selection. And to do that, we can simply add the invert effect inside of our footage. Now we have to change the channel from RGB to alpha. And as you can see now, we have our shadow with a smooth fall off in alpha. Now let's create a new precomposition. And I will call it shadows underscore footage. Now we have to create a new mask around our shadows. I can use the ellipse tool in this case. And in order to achieve a better result, I will smooth my edges using the feather. Now we have to put our shadow composition under our chroma key footage composition. And as you can see now, we have our subject in alpha with the shadows in alpha. We can also manage the amount of our shadows, adjusting the opacity of our precomposition. We can find the transform of our composition inside the transform tab. In this case, I will set around 80. Now we finally complete our chroma key process. Before to render our sequence, we have to fix one problem coming from After Effects. If we activate the RGB strain view, we can see some ugly edges around our subject. And unfortunately, Unreal Engine, we will see those ugly edges. To fix this problem, we have to add some elements inside of our composition. Let's start with adding a new solid layer. So let's go in Layer, New, Solid. I suggest you to set the color of your solid to black or something really, really dark. And now we've moved our solid layer as a background of our precompositions. Now we fixed this problem, but as you can see, we lose our transparency. To fix this, we have to add an adjustment layer inside of our composition. So let's return to our RGB view, and in layer, search for new adjustment layer. Let's change the position of our adjustment layer here, okay. And now let's add a new effect called set matte. But before to adjust our set matte, I have to combine my shadow footage precomposition with my chroma key footage precomposition. So let's create a new precompose, and in this case I will call it chroma key underscore shadow underscore footage. Now we can adjust our set matte, and on take matte from layer we'll choose chroma key shadow footage, and we have to change from source to effects and mask. Now we can finally export our images sequence of our alpha composition. So let's set the in and out point of our composition. And now let's add our composition inside the render queue of After Effects. So let's go in composition, add to render queue. Now we have to set our render in order to achieve an EXR sequence. So let's open the output module. Let's change the format to open EXR sequence, and also be sure that you are exporting also your alpha inside your channels. Let's press OK. You also have to choose, obviously, a directory for your OpenEXR sequence. But before to export our EXR sequence, we have to be sure that we set our project in 32-bit. So let's go in project panel. And as you can see, my project is set in 32-bit. Maybe by default, your project is set to 8-bit. So we can obviously change our project settings, clicking here, and changing the bit depth on 32-bit per channel. I'm doing this because I want to match the bit depth of my EXR files with the bit depth of my project. So let's press OK. And now we can finally render our sequence.